as a teenager or whatever, when you have your first relationships, you believe you're in love, but what you're actually just experiencing is sort of that lust and attraction for the first time. And if true love in the sense of having like a good rapport and it being platonic beyond just the initial, attraction phase where you have just like a good rapport and a good companionship with someone. Is that sort of what true love is in that sense? Are we just confusing our emotions and feelings of lust as love when we're young and develop that sense of love over time? I can think of plenty of times I thought I was in love, and it turns out I was just horny. So.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I can think of plenty of times when I was a teenager I thought I was in love, and it turns out I was just horny.
That sounds like music. Can you repeat that? So that's one question. Any other like easy ones? You look fine. Your hair looks good. Yes.
What's the worst mindset to start off with if you're trying to like truly change? Is it having a delusional mindset or being closed-minded?
Can't you guys like just ask like easy questions like what's my grade or when is this class over?
What's the point?
Yeah.
How old are you?
What?
How old are you?
Why?
I just want to talk about your age a lot because you didn't get this.
I actually have. And I'm recently divorced. I'm just kidding. Hello. I'm 62. So I have to start looking for a house that has no stairs.
My grandma's 62.
Is she single?
Crazy.
I do crazy. Well, sometimes if you just hang out with normal people, life gets really boring. Crazy people just create chaos, which is, they make you feel alive. Not in a bad way or a good way. All right, let's,
Oh, I was going to ask an easy question. Is our last day May 18th?
you should ask the instructor of this class.
I'm asking you now.
I wouldn't know.
Oh.
It's next week. Yeah,
Yeah, I thought we were not meeting on the final.
we're not meeting on the final week. Isn't that from the 18th to something?
I thought that was the 24th. 24th was the last.
I'll check. I'll let you know on Thursday or Wednesday. Yeah, but I think it's,
The final assignment is due Sunday, May 18th, so I would think that's the last.
yeah, so next week, Wednesday, I think. Is it next week or the following week?
No, that's next week.
Yep.
So next Monday, Wednesday.
Yeah, next Wednesday, that's it. You go your way and I'll probably find my way.
And then we will come back for the 3-week session semester.
That's right. For those of you who are interested in finishing up quickly, intersession classes are being offered. You should check the schedule. For those of you who are not doing much during summertime, I'll be here in this room, 6 to 8:50 at night, just standing here, not doing much. Probably have some food, pizza. Yeah.
What is the homework load like for those 3-week classes? Because I'm doing one of your half semester courses right now, which is about double than what the regular classes. But I'm just curious how fast paced the 3-week classes is. Just as dense, you just got a lot of work to do in like 2 days.
In many ways, it depends on the instructor and their understanding of education, what exactly it is that they want. It also depends on how intelligent or foolish the instructor is. You know, sometimes I had a friend many decades ago. He had gone out with a prostitute that he ran into on Capitol and J Street in Sacramento. He looks at her and says, let's go steady, like be in a bona fide relationship. And going back to Elise's question, you know, how do you make such a drastic change from being with people every like 2 minutes, different people, to all of a sudden being with a single human being for, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? I don't know how other instructors deal with the intercession classes, you know. Some people assume it's doable. Some people do it for money. Some people do it because they know students don't really want to stay in Oakland and don't really want to stay at Laney for too long. So they offer these courses so hopefully students can take and just leave, go to a 4-year school hopefully. And some all of the above. You know, it's for money, it's for students. And so as far as the course load, I think it'd be nice if you can just have one single assignment, whether it's for a 3-week class or a 6-week class or an 18-week class or 16 weeks. Just one single assignment where students, hopefully they're interested enough to work on it like, you know, an hour or so every week. So at the end of the semester, they can have this really nice, refined piece of art. But rarely does that happen. I would recommend, figure out if an instructor works for you, then exploit the hell out of him or her. Just take whatever class they offer, you know. And just get done early, quickly with school, especially the, you know, Laney 2-year college. The truth is most of the things that you need to understand and that are important to understand, you'll get them in your 40s or 50s. Not anytime now. Because right now your life is way too busy. You know, holding a job, trying to figure out where exactly you belong in the grand scheme of things, taking classes, writing essays, you know, just, it's a rat race. And so try to survive it the best you can. I think if you plan to go to a good school, like Berkeley or Stanford, take your classes seriously, not because they have anything to teach you, but because you need to go to a good school. You know, and once you get to a place like Stanford, if you want to stay in Stanford, then you have to do some work, you know, and you'll slowly learn that because you'll realize that the classrooms are clean, that the students sitting next to you are clean and they're serious, and the environment itself pushes you into becoming serious. And even though you don't want to, you'll be forced to. And little by little, that creates its own unique set of maturities about you. You know. If you were going to take my intercession class, I'd probably, I don't know, 2, 3 videos, maybe 4, maybe 5, depending on my mood. You know.
The course title?
Oh, you've taken it already.
I thought you were doing like world religion.
No, that's summertime. Summer is 6 or 8 weeks. Intercession is 3 weeks. Yeah.
What's the intersection one?
Philosophy, intro.
Oh.
Yeah. You've taken it last semester, right? Yeah.
Bro, you be at 2 places at one time? Cause
I'm sorry, say again?
you be at 2 places at one time? Cause I didn't just grade my work standing there.
What did you say?
He goes at light speed. I didn't just grade my work standing there. If I turned it late.
I graded this morning.
What grade did you get?
But I turned 25. But I
Okay, we'll
turned,
stop complaining.
I'll go check. Maybe I made a mistake. It was late? No, it was late. I'll consider. Okay.
Now we got it, so.
You have a big mouth. Okay.
I like my answer a lot better. Where you go with like speed.
So let's talk about love. I know that most of you, just the topic itself, would force you to throw up, I don't really blame you. I mean, given the way many of you look in this class, you've been broken plenty of times by this thing called love, been deceived, betrayed. So let me first give you a Persian poem. I will not translate it for you, but I'll just give you the poem. It's really for my own soul. بگذشتین عمر تو دانی به چسان پوچ و پستون چنان باد دمان همه تقصیر من است اینو خودم میدانم که تفکر ننمودم روزی ساعتی یا آنی که چسان میگذرد عمر گران کودکی رفت به بازی به فراغت به نشاط فارغ از نیک و بد و مرگ و حیات All right, that's it. Yeah.
The Persian poems that you that I've studied from any specific book or idea that
So, I don't know how the educational system is right now in Iran, grades 1 to like 5 or 6 or 7, but at my time, if we had to learn a poem, an entire poem every week, and we had to go in front of the classroom and, recite it by heart. And just in case you couldn't, your teacher would first spank you, and then you had to go stand in a corner with one leg up for like an hour and 10 minutes. And then when the class was over, you'd be like limping home. And, it's one of those things when you're a kid and you're forced to do things, you say, well, this is really stupid. I don't even speak Arabic, and yet I have to memorize like verses of the Quran or memorize poems. Then time passes. And then I find myself becoming interested in music, in philosophy. Then I find myself having a teacher. And then time passes, and I realize, man, the stuff I memorized when I was like 5 or 6 or 7 now become handy. And I used to sing Persian, traditional. And so this is the outcome of, having memorized all these poems. Because we have to turn off the lights and then play music. And so if you haven't memorized the poem, then you have to keep the lights on and have your laptop open, like my friend cousin. Hello.
would you liken that to people memorizing verses in the Bible?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So if I was to give you the translation of this poem, the short version, Richard, would be that it's written by a guy, and I don't know who the poet is, it's unknown, who lived his life probably going to school, getting married, having a few kids. One day he looks at himself in the mirror and he realizes he's no longer young. It's a very quiet form of repentance of sorts and regret. And it's not that you have lived a bad life. It's been a relatively good life, but you want to do something more with it before you pass. Only to realize that mentally you don't have the capacity or the energy, physically you're just exhausted. And so you just sit around, as Joseph Campbell used to say, people in general are just running around waiting to die, really. They're not doing anything significant from the moment you're born to the time you die. Except that when you get to be in your 60s or 70s or 80s, where your body begins to kind of betray you a little bit and your mind, you realize that, well, ending your life, you can't do it voluntarily. It goes against your organism. So you just wait. You distract yourself. You go to the garage. As we had a beautiful friend across the car wash in the 1985 all the way to 2000. His name was Gene. This strong, well-built mason. He would come to the car wash every single day, especially after his wife passed. I said, "So Gene, what are you doing today?" "Well, I'm going to the garage and I'm going to sharpen my chisels. I'm going to fix my hammers." I said, "Well, why would you want to do that? You don't even use them anymore." He says, "Yeah, but I used to be a mason for about like 40 years. And when you're young, you don't really understand this stuff. As you get older, you realize that, well, if it wasn't for the chisels and the hammers, the guy would just sit in his chair and get depressed and probably end his life. So the chisels really made him survive." Yeah.
What are the chisels?
It's the stuff you break things with, like concrete or cinder blocks.
Kind of like a spike.
Yeah, it's like a chisel. Yeah, it's kind of like a chisel.
Where you put like a couple of them in the blocks that reach in certain areas of blocks that way.
You guys have your cell phones. If you don't have your cell phone, borrow caseras. Just Amazon chisel, and you'll see it. I'm sorry?
Two cell phones.
She has two. That's right. Of course. So, I suppose in trying to some extent, try to describe what true love is, I'm not claiming that I know. I'm just going to approach this particular topic in the way that Krishnamurti did. And for those of you who may not know who Krishnamurti is, around the 1960s and 70s, much earlier, of course, he was lionized to be the Messiah of the 20th century. There was an organization that was built around him, the Theosophical Society. And you okay? Yeah. And their function was to kind of go around looking for the next Messiah. And so he was chosen as the Messiah at the age of 11. And he was put in a very controlled environment. And his diet was very specific. If, for example, he had a specific cup of water, you couldn't touch it because then your toxic energy would enter that cup and then he would touch it and then he would become contaminated. So it was extremely controlled. When he got to be about 30, he kind of gave a talk that no one has a monopoly on the truth. And no one can tell you what path you need to take in life to get to truth. It really depends on you, it depends on your passion, it depends to what you're actually receptive and whether or not, I suppose, you're lucky to go through certain life experiences. And if you're able to process those experiences. Some people do drugs and they have an experience and they drop back into their body and they really kind of transform their life. They start perhaps going to school, becoming a bit more serious, looking at money different, at their own bodies different, at their mind different. And it benefits them greatly. Some people do drugs, they have a wonderful experience, but eventually they go mad. And they can't really live a good lifestyle, and so it doesn't really end up well for them. I think the difference between someone like, Krishnamurti and someone else was that Krishnamurti had an experience, and instead of becoming intoxicated or drunk with power, he came to realize that all these organizations or cults that are created to better human mind, human life, they don't really do much. What needs to happen is people have to kind of be inspired, and then that inspiration needs to be supported. And hopefully someone can figure out what they're good at and just pursue that. So Krishnamurti's approach to love was via negativa. I can't tell you what love is, but let me tell you what it's not. Now, there are lots of flaws in the way Krishnamurti would do business because he kind of dismisses human nature. The other aspect of Krishnamurti was that, you know, it's kind of like Elon Musk coming on TV saying money is not important. Well, yeah, it's not important if you have billions in your bank account. That women are not important. Yeah, it's not. You know, they're not important or necessary if you have like 50 million lining up to be next to you. And having children is wonderful. Yeah, it's great if you don't have to support them or be around them. So Krishnamurti was one of those fellows who lived a life of privilege. So most of the things that he said, for me at least, they're just useless. You know, because it doesn't speak to the common person who has to struggle to survive in a world that's enormously complicated. You know, there is this chess champion, I think he's number 2 or 3 in the world. He's Indian, his name is Prag, I think. And he sat with this new spiritual teacher whose name is Sadhguru. I don't know how many in this class have heard of this ridiculous guy. So this young 18-year-old chess champion looks at this old sage and asks him, what's the best approach to play chess? Because sometimes I become very anxious. And he says, well, playing chess is like being mad, isn't it? And then he goes on this rant about, you know, spiritual crisis, all this stuff. And I say to myself as I'm watching this ridiculous episode, say, really, this is an 18-year-old kid. You know, you play chess in a very competitive way, which means that anxiety is going to be normal. You know, and the truth is there are some very, 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 very normal and organic emotions you need to have inside you. Frustration is one of them. I mean, the moment you are born, you're frustrated to figure out what exactly you need to do with your life. This idea, like, you raise your hand, how do I overcome frustration? You can't. Life is complicated. You know, figure out the complications of life, understand it well, and hopefully you'll have power, at least a little bit of power over things that are relatively complicated. So, I think human life falls into two different stages. Initially, we live outside of ourselves. I don't know how to love myself. And even that particular concept when I'm young is stupid. Love myself, what the hell does that mean? You know, the idea of loving my past and loving my future and loving my experience. No, you just love the things outside of you. I love video games. I love pizza. I love my wife. I love my kids. And all these different shades of love, what they do for you is that they connect you to the things outside of you. You spend time, I mean, you have children. You know how that works. You know, you come home and you're exhausted and you really want some time to yourself. You want to go into your bedroom and just close your eyes for 10 minutes. Your kid comes home, walks into the bedroom, looks at you and says, Dad, can we go to the park? You say, honey, can you please remove this virus from me? And, you know, and then your kid begins to cry and all of a sudden guilt overcomes you. And you say, yeah, let's go to the park. You know, so the things on the outside have a tremendous amount of power over you. They influence you, manipulate you, coerce you, exploit you. And then in the course of you pursuing your ambitions, all of which exist outside of you, you really begin to lose time, youth, vitality, energy. Can I tell you a story? So on Thursday, my mom called me saying that one of our best friends that I have known for the past maybe 40 years, and we've been to his house maybe 1,000 times, we've played music over 1,000 times, very kind and generous man. He's in his, I think 70s or late 70s. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer a couple of years ago. But the news was that his son, who was 49, a wife with 2 kids, He was on the plane coming back from somewhere, and he has a migraine headache. He's unable to see. He's unable to put the spoon in his mouth to feed himself. He's unable to walk. They rush him to the hospital, and they find a tumor in his brain. And so they operate, but it spread everywhere. And so he has stage 4 cancer, and they have given him 3 to 6 months. Now, he has his master's in anthropology, and he's gone to various countries, Egypt, one of them, trying to dig up some artifacts from, thousands of years ago. A very wonderful husband, wonderful kid to his parents, wonderful father. So he has lived outside. Now you lay on your deathbed, waiting for this cancer to eventually take your life, and you sit back. And your wife can't reach you. Your parents are grieving. You can't do much, but their grieving really is useless as well. You can't get yourself out of the bed because it's far too painful. You have to do chemo 5, 6 times a day. That in itself is painful. And once that process is done, you have to take these humongous pills. That's going to cause your body to kind of pump a little bit. And so at a certain point, you realize you're losing basically everything, and you're forced to kind of review your life mentally to see what you've done, if it's been worth it. Now, he may be one of those temperaments where he's actually quite happy with the outcome of his life, that he said, I can, for the most part, die knowing that I've been a good son, a good husband, and a good father, and that's it. And maybe a few regrets here and there. If you happen to have a different kind of a temperament where you begin to reflect, and the problem with reflection is that it also comes with a good amount of doubt, skepticism about what you're doing and why you're doing them, whether or not they're relevant, meaningful, they have any substance. Where are you going? I mean, you look nice. The what? The what? Really? Oh. Well, that inspires me. After class, I'm going to go to the estuary, take off my clothes. All right. Yes?
As somebody who's lost their friend to a brain tumor, I'm very rest in peace, and I feel sorry for your loss.
Well, he's not dead yet, but he'll be. Yeah, but thank you, Stephen. Thank you. The nice thing about living outside of yourself and loving the things on the outside is that things on the outside can actually give you purpose and meaning. They can create desires for you, and you can kind of just pursue them. And they make life meaningful for you for a long, long, long time. I mean, you have to really work really hard as a father for the next 15, 20 years to figure out the best environment for your children. You have to figure out how much you can pay for their college, figure out whether or not you can pay for their 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom once they move out, if they're going to be a man or a woman or in between, if they're going to end up doing drugs, if they're going to be homeless. So there are lots of things to worry about, and that's going to occupy your mental space for a long, long time. Eventually, your kids are going to turn out like you, in the sense that how often do you keep in touch with your parents? But once in a while. And just in case your mom says, I'm not feeling well, what exactly can you do, really? I mean, your plate is full. You have your life. You can't just look at your wife and say, I'm going to leave and go to my mom's and I'm going to stay there for like 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks to take care of her, because then she'll leave you. And then that's going to impact your children's psychology. And so living on the outside really occupies a good amount of who and what you are. And then you may hit these bumps once in a while, Richard, where you say to yourself, is it worth it? Now, you'll be very, very lucky if these are just moments of hiccup, that you're pushed into reflection, you're pushed into depression, or maybe just internalizing, yourself and your life, and you're going to feel bad, but they're going to last. Those moments are going to last maybe for a minute, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. Then luckily for you, a friend is going to call you, or your kid is going to harass you, or your wife is going to fight you with, this or that. And then the whole episode is going to be forgotten. And then it's going to reappear, the way kind of like the life of Tolstoy unfolded. You may be of a more tragic temperament, the sort of Hamlet style, where you're a bit of an existentialist. You look at your life and you say, I want freedom. I want freedom from my wife, from my husband, from my marriage, from my children, from school, from my job, from money, from the desires of my body, from the desires created by society. And freedom from ultimately turns into freedom to. I want my freedom in the sense that I want to go to Grass Valley or Yosemite. I want to live amongst the woods. I don't want to be bothered by ridiculous people and ridiculous things and their pathetic desires and ambitions. I want to be the owner of my own life. Now, this later stage of life demands that you begin to fall in love, or at least quest after a self-image that has nothing to do with your attachment to the outside. It's kind of like Plato's allegory of the cave, or the life of the salmon fish. One of the nice things about my parents is that my father is the only man that my mom knows, and my mom is the only woman that my dad knows. And they've had almost like a 70-year relationship. But the tragedy of that codependency is that my father is 92. Once he dies, then my mom has to reorient herself, and that's not going to be possible, because kind of like the change that Elise was talking about. As an almost 80-year-old woman, how do you cope with the passing of your husband, the only man you've known? How do you all of a sudden reorient yourself in laying in your bed all by yourself? No one's going to lay next to you. How are you going to reorient yourself to be okay with walking into your house and not having your husband there, not cooking for him anymore, not having tea with him anymore, not watching TV with him anymore? And so for the first time, she realized that this is a grief that nothing on the outside can push out. She's going to internalize this, and given our tradition, she's going to wear black for a long, long time. She's going to become somewhat mute for a while. And the 3 kids, myself, my sister, and my brother, we're going to visit her almost on a daily basis. And then for the next 40 years, once my father dies, we're going to have company every day for the next 6-7 months. That's how the tradition functions, so that you don't internalize the experience. And that's one of the nice things. It's a puzzle, really, that these ancient cultures, kind of the story, the narrative they create, that since human beings can't really figure out the big stuff of life, let's give them good distractions. I can't figure out what death means. I can't figure out if there's an afterlife. I can't really figure out depression. It's too much for me. So what the culture does is, instead of you raising your hand in the classroom and saying, what the hell do I do with grief? What do I do when my mom passes away? Don't ask these silly questions, because they are silly. The culture has the answers for you. The moment someone very close to you dies, you're going to have company. You're going to have visitors every single day. And when you have company, what will happen is that people will begin to talk about their own losses, the parents that they lost, the divorce they went through, the kids that committed suicide. And all of a sudden you realize now you have a healthy form of gossip. Everybody's talking about the things that meant so much to them, but they no longer have them. And this gossip, what it does, it lightens you a little bit. Add to the fact that we have music that is there to inspire tears. It's like the wailing tradition in the Middle Ages, where these nuns knew that the element of forgetfulness in the human being is far too powerful and far too strong. It's not enough for you to kind of just open the Bible and read and all of a sudden feel connected to God. It doesn't work that way. So what you do is you have one person, a woman or a man, doesn't really matter, and they'll hold 2 pieces of onions, right in front of their face, close to their eyes, and then tears begin to flow down. And then once they have manipulated their psyche, and once tears begin to flow, they're going to look at these tears as a symbol of being expelled from the Garden of Eden. And all of a sudden, this one person begins to scream that I am a human being. مرغ باغ ملکوتم نیم از عالم خاک دو سه روزی قفسی ساختند از بدنم. That I was in the Garden of Eden. I had wings. I was close to the gods, but then I was expelled. My wings were clipped, and now I am grounded. And I desire to fly back home. I just don't know how. And not knowing how forces me to cry, to scream. And all of a sudden you realize all these men and women who are waiting for you to start screaming, and you do, and all of a sudden your prayers, your screams, your tears impact them. Now you have 50 people are screaming and tearing, and now you have a support system. What you have is 50 women or 50 men breaking emotional bread. And so the nice thing about my parents is my mom really never had to be in a classroom raising her hand and saying, Professor, how do I love myself? That question does not exist for her. She's free from asking those questions. She's not tormented by those questions. If someone was to ask her, so Mrs. Razazan, what is love? You get married when you're young, you have children when you're young, and you just raise good kids. And how does my mom keep herself from reflection? She calls me 5 times, my brother 5 times, my sister 5 times, the grandkids 5 times. And she gets into arguments with my father about politics. And before you know it, it's midnight. No reflection, beautiful life. Okay. Now, for someone who does self-interrogation, who walks into life with a good amount of skepticism, you can never be fully invested in anything because you know that there is something about you that's missing. قیمت هر کاله دانی که چیست قیمت خود را ندانی احمقی است. That you know the price of milk, you know the price of pencil, you know the price of a car, you know the price of this or that, but you have no idea of your own value. Which means that, there is a value system that's outside out there and there's a value in here. Let me figure out what my own value is. And now you go on this quest to figure out, what is the value of your time? What is the value of your youth? What is the value of the way you're spending your time and your youth? And on whom are you spending them? Are they valuable? Are they worth it? And all of a sudden you realize you walk into life 1 step forward and 10 steps back because you don't really know that if people are there to steal your youth and your time, or they're actually benefiting you in some shape or form in the path of self-knowledge. So the answer to your question, let me just do it in a very, very different way that's perhaps easier to understand. Any other questions before I go on another long rant about nothing? Yes, Makai.
Oh, nothing for me.
After,
The what?
after.
Oh, after, yes. Well, let me change direction a little bit. Let me tell it to you this way. How many of you in this class have been in long-term relationships? My condolences. Anything more than a night. This day and age, that's a long-term relationship. Even a day is, how about a minute? Good job. For those of you who have been in long-term relationships, however way you want to define that, you spend so much time trying to get this person's attention, and then you spend more time trying to hold their attention. And then you spend a lot of time, money and energy trying to kind of just have fun now that he or she is in your life. And you make a lot of noise in the bedroom. And it's all about the other person and how being with this other person impacts your own emotions as well. And so for the first few months, because things are somewhat glossy and life hasn't really hit, things are really fun. And you are in love and you're willing, like Abraham, to sacrifice yourself on his or her behalf. Then time gets in. You're not as interested. You're still very interested, but not as interested. Then you're not really interested, but because you like the relationship, you pretend to be interested. And then you lose the ability to pretend. And then you go on long walks. And you say, my relationship is hemorrhaging. It needs to be on life support. I need to figure out what machine I need to go to Kaiser and get, and what tube I need to hook up to this relationship, so some air, some life can get into it. So you get a rose, you hold their hand, you go to the cemetery, hopefully to inspire a conversation. You go to the movies. And there comes a point where you realize that even those things don't do much for you. And then you realize the whole thing has become meaningless. Now, the wonderful thing about finding yourself in a place of complete meaninglessness is that you have the freedom to inject all sorts of things into it. It's one of those ridiculous things that existentialists would tell us. You have the freedom to make choices and to make decisions. But you've come to realize you don't really want to. You don't want to invest any more energy into it. You don't want to invest any part of yourself in the relationship. It has, like everything else under the sun, it has outlived its usefulness. You wore a jacket, you loved your jacket, now you give it away. You took your kids to the park for 5 hours, that's enough. You don't want to see them anymore, at least for the rest of the day. The problem with your question, or perhaps this two-tiered answer to your question, which is initially you love the things on the outside, then you realize that you don't want to invest any more time and energy on the things outside, you want to invest on you. But you have so much history with outside of yourself that it's really difficult to divorce all those narratives and stories and go within, I suppose, to figure out who you are, what you want to do for the last few years of your life. And this idea of pretending to be okay with your family, it's bad faith, as Sartre would say, but forget that for a moment. There's only, you can only pretend for so long before you fall apart. This idea of self-love, the Greeks have this god by the name of Hephaestus.
God of the forge.
Yes. Hephaestus is a welder. And what Hephaestus does is, and I suppose it could be true for all sorts of loves, but because most of the things we love on the outside are easily breakable, Hephaestus' task is really to weld you to yourself. The problem with welding is that, I don't know if you've ever seen welds. You can weld 2 pieces of steel, or you can weld 2 pieces of stainless steel. Now, the weld that you use for regular steel is very different than stainless. The kind of rods you use for regular steel can't be used for stainless steel. It just won't even stick. Okay. I think there is a special welding machine designed for all of us human beings to fall in love with the things on the outside. And that particular love can last for maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 months, for 2 years. Eventually it's going to break. Stainless, on the other hand, they are permanent unless you get a grinder to them. They won't rust, they won't crack, and they won't break. Okay. I don't know who is worthy of being paid attention to by Hephaestus for her to come down and weld us to ourselves. And I don't really think there is a self to be loved. I think you have to find someone to love. I'm not like a Jesus Christ who can go into the desert and all of a sudden find God. That's not my capacity. The best thing I can hope for is find a Juliet. You know, I think, what's his name? Woody Allen was right. Whatever works. If you've come to realize that you live in the desert and there's not too many things out there that can nourish you, find something that can entertain you in a relatively healthy way. Yeah.
Ray Allen is married to his stepdaughter.
That's okay. You know, there are all sorts of things I could say about Trump. But the truth is, the bottom line, there is something profoundly intoxicating about power. I don't have that. So I would know how that would transform me from someone who may be relatively decent to someone who's purely evil. I don't know. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about the goods and bads of Donald Trump. I think that's a waste of, time and conversation. I think the more valuable thing to talk about is what is the nature of power and what happens to someone who is unreflective and is given lots of power. That's a conversation worth having, because all of us could kind of fall in that category. And you don't really have to be a Donald Trump. You could have your own life, and your life has a certain amount of power. I mean, imagine when you have found your companion having done something wrong, like not taking the trash out or not washing dishes. Well, you assume power by becoming very angry, but not laying with him, but not being friendly to him, right? And these are all powers that you have, and you get intoxicated, drunk by these powers, and fear overcomes him. You create your own set of, I suppose, ice, where he has to walk on eggshells. All of us, exercise those things. And I suppose upon reflection, you would ask, hopefully, well, what's the more evolved way of approaching power, being drunk by power, and using power? If you're able to understand that, then you're also able to understand someone like Elon Musk. The only difference between Musk and someone like me is that Musk's power leaks into the social culture, the social domain. Okay. My power, if I was to use it badly, is only going to impact 30 people. His usage of power is going to put about 500,000 people out of job, and healthcare, and mortgage, and divorce. Okay. But power is power. So, Abraham Maslow, I know we've talked about him before, but since the question puts him in a different context, let's just briefly go over that 2-minute thing. Love food. Sometimes you spend an hour driving to a place to satisfy a memory given to you by a taste bud, given to you by an experience 2 years ago. Love shelter. Sometimes you spend weeks, if not years, trying to look for a place that's good for you, good for your companion, good for your children. Love your health. Sometimes you get sick. The only thing that occupies you is your body. These three things occupy about 80% of our life. Some of us are privileged enough to kind of overcome these desires. We come from a good background, our parents have money, we have money, you can get a job, whatever. Then comes this idea of love. Your parents divorced at the age of 2, there is some part of you that remains broken. And you try to kind of weld the broken parts for the rest of your life, which means that you'll be distracted by this particular emotion for a long, long time. Okay? You're never going to self-reflect. Like, how can I love myself? No, you say, how can I be lovable to another human being? That is your agenda in life. Sometimes you happen to be very lucky and you're born in a family or a social environment where there is plenty of love to go around. So that's not your deficiency. Next is you're tired of your mom's love, you're tired of your dad's love, you're tired of your familial love, siblings and relatives and all that. You say, you know what, I want to go out there and make friends. Now, what you have to do is figure out how to be socialized. You know, and you realize there are some quirks about you, there are some things you're deficient in, and you try to work on them. How do I overcome shyness? For some strange reason, I get frustrated far too easily. Okay. How do I make friendships? What sort of friendships? And those things occupy you until you realize that you have in your circle about 5, 10, 15, 20 friends, so you don't have deficiency in that area. So when you look at these 3 stages, you don't think about food as much, you don't think about shelter as much, you don't think about your health as much. Okay. So that's privilege. You don't think about parents as much because they're there and they love you. You don't think about friendships because you have plenty of them. You don't think about love, confirmation, affirmation, you have plenty of those. So in those areas, you're also sufficient. And then you come to this class. I'm not your dad, I'm not your friend, but you got to find a way to please me. Ask good questions. Okay. And now you realize you live in society, and society has hierarchy in it. You have to know your place. That takes a lot of awareness. You're weak, I'm strong. I have power over your future. Now, I may be wrong. How do you best wrestle with someone who's a bully? Okay. And eventually you and I will find a way to work this out. And then that gets translated into you getting a job and having a boss you don't like, having coworkers you don't like. Now, all these components are going to engage you mentally, and they're going to create emotions you don't like. And those emotions are going to engage you mentally for a long, 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 long time. I mean, you have had arguments with your companion. You know what that does. It like gets stuck in your brain. You don't think about God or philosophy or any of the stuff you talk about in this class. Or you say to yourself, how do I make peace with my companion? And God forbid, if your child gets sick, that's all you will think about. Maybe not as much as your wife, but you will certainly have enough of mental space being occupied by those ideas. Okay. Let's say you have enough privilege where you don't even think about your job as much because everything is going well. Now, if you happen to be a tragic hero, something that the Greeks warned us about, privilege in body and mind, privilege in the domain of love and parents and friendships, privilege in money and job. One day you look yourself in the mirror and you say, now what? And for someone like Abraham Maslow, you have entered this stage of self-knowledge. You realize that it doesn't matter what your wife says about you, how much she loves you. You can't love yourself. You don't know how to love yourself. You have entered a different stage. And every stage you move into, the questions are different. The emotions are different. The context is different. And it's going to engage and occupy you in completely different ways. The problem with this stage that we call self-knowledge is that, now look, any kind of self-knowledge is good. Having knowledge of how your body works, it's good. Having the knowledge of what ticks your wife off is good. Having the knowledge of what makes your kids happy is good. Having the knowledge of what classes you need to take to graduate is good. Having the knowledge of what gives you a raise at work is good. These are wonderful information to have. Now, you're approaching a different venue, which is, I want self-knowledge, not a knowledge that's connected to my body, not a knowledge that's connected to my body living in a social political world, familiar world, married world, father world. I want a self-knowledge that's divorced from all these different things. It's not connected to anything. I'm looking for Atman. I'm looking for the kingdom of God. I'm looking for species self, as Karl Marx would say. Okay. The problem with that is, well, there are no reference points. We have some ridiculous heroes like Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad and Mahavir. I mean, these are all fine. But what you will do is you will read some books, and again, it depends on your capacity. What is able to pacify you? If you're able to be pacified, your quest will end. And that's the thing. If things out there are unable to pacify you, nourish you, the quest for self-knowledge for you will remain, and it'll be chaotic. You'll be shipwrecked, because for the past many years, food, shelter, clothing, familiar love, friendship, job, money, house, all the stuff has been your main occupation. All of a sudden you say, I see the things out there, I don't relate, I don't identify. You plunge into darkness, and you're going to stay there for a long time unless someone comes in and creates an image inside you. I want to stop there because, yeah. So, yeah. Does that? I'm not really quite sure what works anymore, to be honest. Yeah, especially in a culture such as this where it's young and it doesn't have the right narratives. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, you're a father, it's like looking at your 12-year-old daughter and telling her how vicious boys are. Your daughter will never get that, no matter how much you try. And in frustration, you pack up and you move to Wyoming. You buy this huge land, cows and camels and dogs, and then one day you'll come home, she's no longer there. She's packed up and she left. Because she wants to go to New York. She wants to hang out with boys. And the point I'm trying to make is nothing. Yeah, nothing.
Do we engage in self-destructive behavior because we subconsciously believe we deserve to be punished?
Well, I had I suppose, student many years ago. She had a disabled sister. Her sister was older than she was. She had difficulty walking, eating, bathing, talking. She just had difficulties in all sorts of things. And her disability, usually she was supposed to live for 20 years and then pass away, but she survived till she was like 50. And I don't know if you know what parents have to go through if they have a disabled child. They're on the phone 24/7 talking to healthcare providers, always fighting with their job to get a better, more pay so they can pay for more stuff, medicine and all that stuff. The way it impacts your relationship with your husband, the way it impacts your relationship with your other kids. And so this other sister who was relatively healthy, also attractive, she had this thing called survivor's guilt. Okay. Now, the entire family self-sabotaged themselves from being happy, from enjoying what little privilege that they had in life, or what a lot of privilege they had in life. So they could never be happy. And then the sister passed away. Once she passed away, they became free of that particular guilt. And they bought a big house. She got into a relationship. She's happy. For the first time in her life, I think, I haven't spoken to her for many, many years now, but I think for the first time in her life, she knows what a stable relationship looks like. Sometimes you look at homeless people, you look at people who are not as privileged as you are, and you feel bad for your own position, your own place in life. Sometimes you have sick parents who are a little older, and they need your help. And the more you become aware of their needs, the less you're able to enjoy what you want to do as a young kid in your life. Sometimes you may have a more expansive consciousness or awareness, which means that you look at what's just happening in the world. People losing their jobs, people being in wars, and you say, I don't have the right to be happy. Sometimes, like me, you may be a person of color, and you may have just heard that your best friend was taken by ICE and deported. And then you say, well, you know, shit can happen at any time to anyone. I don't have the right to be happy. The other is, you may have read Plato's allegory of the cave. You may have read the creation story in the Bible. And you may have been sold this image that human beings have been expelled from the Garden of Eden. And this place really is a vale of tears. That from the moment you wake up to the time you go to bed, it's just constant struggle. And struggle towards nothing really. Because that's what, in the end, you have nothing. And so, you have to understand, for example, look at Jesus. Never once does he smile or laugh in any of the four Gospels. Not once. He doesn't find human existence one of entertainment or happiness. It's all misery and suffering and sorrow, because we're always expelled from the kingdom of God within. And your task is to try to figure out where that kingdom is, find it, and then live in it. For Moses, it's always the promised land. For Muhammad, it's always living in society that creates injustice. And your task is to be a warrior for the poor, for the disfranchised. For someone like Confucius, life is a serious business. Your time is very, very short on this planet. Make sure that you know this life force that exists in cosmos. Make sure that you're good to your parents. Make sure you're responsible to your society. And the point I'm trying to make really is that human beings, if you live according to the philosophies of so-called the giants of humanity, is that your life down here is one of seriousness. And every time you laugh, a belly laugh. Every time you engage in gossip, you should feel bad. If, on the other hand, that is not the platform on which you function, if that's not your world, if your world consists of smoking and drinking and porning and clubbing and going to comedy clubs and listening to this guy, listening to that guy, then you're exempt. Your life is created to be one of fun and happiness. If you read Leo Tolstoy wrote this book called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. If I get his name right, Ivan has a butler who has a son whose name is Garsan, if I'm again not mistaken. Garsan is 18. Ivan Ilyich is about to die. And Garsan, this 18-year-old, is taking care of this man who's dying. And this old man looks at this young kid and says, you're 18, don't you want to go out there, find yourself like a girlfriend, go to the movies, have a good time with life? What are you doing here taking care of me? And this 18-year-old looks at this old dying man and says, no, because I know one day too I will get old, I will get sick, and I will be laying flat on my deathbed. And I would like someone like me to take care of me. And I'm hoping that what I'm doing for you, someone will do for me when I get to be your age or when I get to be sick. And you realize, this young kid has a tremendous amount of awareness about time, about old age, about sickness, about death, about loneliness, about frustration, about struggle. that he says, you know what? I'm not here to have fun with life. I'm not going to allow life to manipulate me, to exploit me by giving me cheesy moments, ridiculous moments where I can just have a belly laugh and for it to disappear quickly. Look at the life of Socrates. He doesn't laugh in any of the 2,000 pages that Plato writes us. Muhammad doesn't smile. The Buddha doesn't smile. I mean, these people give us some horrifying philosophies of life. You know, the question, how do I really love? And how do I really know that that's real love? I mean, that's a horrifying question to ask. Because it indicates a good amount of doubt and skepticism, reflection, you know, pain, quest, alienation, fear, and all the other junk that comes with it. Yes? Anyone else? Yeah.
Why is Gilgamesh afraid of death, even if it's from his God?
Well, of course, once you take my religion class, we'll talk about this in great depth. But for the longest time, I think in the life of Gilgamesh, death is far from him. And he thinks about it intellectually. He reads books on it. He, like me, you know, offers a class on philosophy of death. But it's very distant from him. Then he falls in love. And he falls in love with someone who has innocence in him, who has the kingdom of God in him. He has awareness in him. His name is Enkidu. Okay. Now, he could fall in love with Beyonce, he could fall in love with Justin Timberlake, but he chooses to fall in love with Enkidu. Now, that is real love for Gilgamesh because he's connected to something that he can't really describe. Now, in this particular love, what you have is dependency. The only reason why I am happy is because I love you. That's the only reason why I'm happy. And it's not because you take me to bars and we laugh and we have sex all the time. You ask difficult questions. You make my life meaningful by taking me to places that are dark, that are frightening. And yet, when I'm next to you, I feel comforted. I feel brave and courageous. Now, when you're in love, the assumption is this person is never going to go away. And this emotion is never going to fade. Enkidu dies. In death, you feel abandoned. In death, you feel betrayed. In death, you feel isolated and you feel alone. And you're frightened. Frightened because now that death is here and death takes everything. You know, it's like, go home today and call these stores who just pick up your furniture. Take everything away. Stand in the middle of your living room. And you realize there is nowhere to sit. And there is no fridge. There is nothing. Your house is just one of complete emptiness. And you say, well, now what? You know, that is what death does. It just empties life from inside. Not just life itself, but you. You can no longer find any relationship with life. And that's a frightening place to be. And then the question is, that's one kind of awareness. That there is nothing or nowhere in life you can go to fill it up with something. The next is, well, if you were to put some sofas and chairs in this empty space, what kinds of sofas and chairs? What is worthy or valuable of this particular space? Where do you go to find them? How much do they cost? Is there a GPS to all of this? For Gilgamesh there was, and it's not going back to the city. Because when you fall in love with a Malcolm X or a Gandhi or a Muhammad or a Jesus, they really take away the entire humanity from you. You can't find anyone, 8 billion people on this planet, and yet you realize no one comes close to Gandhi or Malcolm, to Muhammad, to the Buddha. No, and that's enormous poverty. You know, that one human being has the power to destroy all human civilization for you. Everything that we've done, okay? The lucky thing for Gilgamesh is that he comes to realize that time is short, that Hades, death, will come at any time and will take you at any time. So whatever you need to do it ASAP. This idea that you have a long time, it doesn't exist. For him, there is a GPS, and his name is King Utanapishtim. And Utanapishtim is this guy. He's like Jesus Christ, who has found the kingdom of God with him. He's like Moses, who has found the promised land with him. He's like Muhammad, who's found the light with him. And King Utanapishtim, his name is he who has found life. And he's found life because God, Ea, gave him this wisdom that's immortal, that lives inside him. And so he goes to him and says, I want immortal life. I don't want to die. And he ultimately comes to realize the only way that any one of us in this class can attain immortality is by living a life that is immortal. Malcolm X is just a mere human being, but because of the relationship he had with justice, and because justice is immortal and eternal, Malcolm becomes immortal and eternal. That may not be the answer to your question, but that's the best I can do right now. Is it time to go? Well, thank you. It's good to see all of you. See you Wednesday.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.